The D branch, the Green Line's longest branch. It has an incredible history, starting as a railroad line in the 19th century, converted to streetcar use in the 20th century, and extending out to Union Square in Somerville in the 21st century. This year, the United States celebrates its 250th anniversary on July 4th. But on the same date, the D branch began operating, albeit being only 67 years old. Regardless, as part of this year's festivities, I thought it'd be a great idea to celebrate the founding of the USA with one of its transit lines, especially one which shares the same birthday.
The D branch starts its story as a railroad line which was made up of different pieces. The first segment was built by the Boston and Worcester Railroad with a branch line from its main line by Governor Square, now Kenmore Square, to the town of Brookline. The branch line began running trains on April 10, 1848 from a terminus at today's Brookline Village to Boston near today's South Station. At this point in time, the branch line was a fast and convenient service for the folks of Brookline to get to downtown Boston, thereby being a success. Around the time of the new service, a petition had been filed to the state legislature to link Boston with the state of Rhode Island via rail. No, I don't mean the company, I meant installing a rail line. In 1849, the Charles River Branch Railroad was chartered to link Boston with Dover as part of the plan to connect with Rhode Island. This connected the B&W's Brookline branch over to Dover by way of Newton, Upper Falls, and Needham. In 1854, the Upper Falls segment began hauling trains to Brookline. A year later, the line was further extended out to Needham before reaching Dover. The Charles River Branch Railroad merged with the Charles River Railroad a year earlier, where the full line to Rhode Island was completed in 1863 upon being further merged with the New York and Boston Railroad.
The New York and Boston Railroad would eventually turn into the New York and New England Railroad in 1873. Though the story of how that happened is a bit funky, it doesn't really pertain to our story. Meanwhile, the Boston and Worcester Railroad would merge with two other railroads to become the Boston and Albany Railroad in 1867, essentially connecting the two namesake cities. But why do these two companies matter? Because of Newton. By the 1870s, passenger service had made way to Newton Upper Falls with stations provided by the New York and New England Railroad. The Boston and Albany also provided commuter rail service for the city along its main line, what is now part of the Framingham-Worcester line. But Newton wasn't all too satisfied with its trains.
The New York and New England segment in Newton was atrocious. The May 15, 1886 issue of the Newton Graphic recalls not only the line being single-tracked, but also the railbed being uneven. This left passengers feeling unsafe on board the train for fear of derailment. The service also lacked an adequate frequency and susceptible to delays. Meanwhile, the opposite was true for the B&A, as its commuter trains were much more appreciated. So, in 1882, the Newton Circuit Railroad was formed by Newton residents with a simple plan. Utilizing the Brookline branch, improve the existing rail line from Brookline to Newton Upper Falls, branch it off to Riverside, and connect the branch with the B&A's main line. Thus, a circuit would be made between Boston and Newton. This would ensure that the New York and New England's tracks would be greatly improved and deliver a more admirable service to Newton. At the same time, an area of the city would be developed with the new branch in place. The following year, the B&A bought the right-of-way from the New York and New England to Newton Upper Falls and built out the remaining pieces to Riverside. On May 16, 1886, the Highland branch was born. 3 new stations were gradually included once the line finished construction. Woburn opened in August of that year, Woodland followed a month later, and Elliott joined in December of 1888. The B&A joined the New York Central family in 1900, taking the Highland branch with it, but the branch and other pieces of the B&A were still referred to the old railroad. Something about Massachusetts being confused as to why they have a rail network named after their rival state. Anyway, since its inception, the B&A worked on improvements towards the Highland branch. One was removing all existing railroad crossings at the start of the 20th century. This involved areas where the track bed was lowered, which resulted in providing lower boarding levels for Newton Center and Newton Highland stations. Meanwhile, the New York and New England had still operated its own passenger service while sharing the tracks with the B&A. After a series of bankruptcies and reorganizations, this railroad ended up being a part of the New Haven. In 1906, the New Haven established the Needham Cutoff, which rerouted trains to veer off to Forest Hills instead of Newton Highlands. This particularly benefited the B&A, as it freed up capacity on the Highland branch, allowing the B&A to run more of its trains.
The Highland branch, in conjunction with the loop it created, proved to be even more successful than the former Brookline branch. By the 1910s, the service provided 30 round trips a day. Trains contributed to further developing Newton, while its citizens got a much more comfortable ride. Unfortunately, the success wouldn't last forever. By the end of the Second World War, the B&A's parent company, the New York Central, By the end of the Second World War, the B&A's parent company, the New York Central, and railroads across the country were set on a path of losing ridership against the rise of the automobile. The reduction in riders, among other issues, caused financial burdens for these companies, but they were still obliged to provide passenger service as mandated by the Interstate Commerce Commission. The Highland branch was no exception. The New York Central was desperate to do anything to help with its money problems, especially if it can get the Highland branch and its other passenger services off its hands. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Transit Authority in Massachusetts was looking for ways to generate new riders onto its transit networks, and one option it was looking at was the NYC's failing branch line.
Commuter trains offer great benefits, not least of which through connecting suburban communities with a major metropolis. But a city like Newton, with its close proximity to Boston, could be better befitted through a rapid transit service. That's what state legislation, transit studies, and network expansion proposals had envisioned as early as the 1910s. The first proposal came in 1913. The Boylston subway was being built at this time to connect with the Tremont Street subway. The Boylston subway was built to first accommodate streetcars to run to the Tremont Street subway, but could then be converted to a rapid transit line, your typical subway service where trains are powered by a conventional third rail. So the first proposal was to essentially connect the Boylston Street subway from Kenmore Square to the Highland branch, and the Highland branch would be converted from a railroad to a rapid transit line. In 1926, a different proposal emerged from the Metropolitan District Commission. The Highland branch was still proposed as a rapid transit line, but instead of joining the Boylston Street subway at Kenmore, the line would join with the then proposed Huntington Avenue subway through Brookline Village. A proposal upon a proposal, if you will. In 1945, the Coolidge Commission generated a report about various rapid transit expansion plans. Again, the Highland branch was proposed to be converted to a rapid transit line along most of the existing railroad right-of-way, similar to the 1913 proposal. Furthermore, a branch was proposed to run along the former Charles River Branch Railroad from Newton Highlands to Needham Junction. And on top of all of that, an additional line was suggested to run from Riverside to the Tremont Street subway by running in tandem with the Boston and Albany's main line, essentially upgrading the Newton Railroad circuit into a rapid transit circuit.
Studies, proposals, commissions, you named it, were ongoing for over 40 years. But in 1956, the MTA nudged the state legislature in acquiring the Highland branch from the New York Central. The agency's intentions were clear. They wanted to gain new riders onto its public transit network by expanding out into the suburbs, but they wanted to do it in a cost-effective manner. The Boylston Street subway was never upgraded to a proper rapid transit line and continued to operate trolleys. Plus, the MTA wanted to use the Highland branch as quickly as possible. Therefore, the agency went with expanding its streetcar network rather than establishing a new subway line. In 1957, the state agreed to the agency's proposal. On May 31, 1958, the Boston and Albany ran its final trains on the Highland branch before handing over the right-of-way to the MTA a month later. Thus, the Highland branch was no more, and the Riverside line was born.
Converting the rail line to a streetcar service was fairly straightforward, with work beginning on July 10th of 1958. Initially, the MTA retained as much of the infrastructure, including existing tracks left by the B&A and just erected catenary poles with wires strung between them. But there were some noticeable changes. First and foremost was connecting the former railroad line with the Boylston Street subway. To achieve this, a tunnel branched off from the Beacon Street streetcar tunnel, now the C branch of the Green Line, to a new portal and station named Fenway Park. Though the name would eventually change to just Fenway because Kenmore is actually closer to Fenway Park. You can't trick Bostonians that easily. Further down the line, Reservoir was modified. The tracks linked with the Reservoir car house and a loop was created above the through-running tracks. The idea for the loop was there would be more passengers between Reservoir and downtown Boston, so Reservoir would allow quicker turnarounds for trolleys. Towards the end of the line, Woodland and Riverside stations were relocated. Riverside, being the final stop of the new service, was given a turning loop and some storage tracks. Finally, an infamous change came with the station designs. In the 1880s, the Boston and Albany hired architects to design buildings for some of its stations, including those on the Highland branch. The architects followed the Richardsonian Romanesque style, named after the style's creator, Henry Hobson Richardson, who subsequently also participated in the B&A's endeavors. Richardson revived the Romanesque style, a style used between the 11th and 13th century in Western Europe. Richardson added to the style by incorporating various arches to his design. Possibly the most well-known of his works is the Trinity Church at Copley Square. Unfortunately, by the late 50s, both the B&A and the MTA had either sold off the station buildings or demolished them completely to make room for parking. The only surviving buildings are at Newton Highlands and Newton Center Station, though Woodland also has a surviving building. But with the station relocation, the building is presently used as a storage facility for a country club. To compensate for the loss of beautiful architecture, the MTA built shelters at some stations in a style representative of the former buildings. But let's be honest, these are just awful. If there's one bad outcome of the Riverside line, it was this. Oh, plus Woodland and Riverside were given a sea of parking spaces while the other stations had relatively smaller ones. And since Riverside was relocated, it got its own station building. Not as bad as the other station shelters, but still leagues behind Richardson's design. Why can't we make nice things anymore?
It took less than a year to convert the rail line to a streetcar line. All things considered, this was a pretty impressive feat. On July 4th, 1959, the Riverside line began operating. Interestingly, the first train that ran consisted of 3 PCC cars. The lead car was number 3295, who can be found resting at Boylston Station, still wearing her MTA colors. Aside from that, the Riverside line was an instant success. The Boston and Albany was transporting between 2,000 and 3,000 riders a day by the Highland branch's demise. But the Riverside line smashed those numbers so hard they flew out of Fenway Park.
Oh, there it goes. High deep drive left field. Kiss it goodbye. Completely out of Fenway Park.
By the end of 1959, the service had amassed over 26,000 riders a day, and by the end of the following year, it was more than 36,000. This is owed to better frequency in service, faster vehicles, direct access to downtown Boston, and even cheaper fares. Our story doesn't end just yet. Time would progress, and the Riverside line would evolve with it. Not long after the transit service had commenced, the MTA quickly jumped into action on upgrading its new transit line.
Earlier, it was mentioned how the MTA expected there to be less riders beyond Reservoir, hence it created a loop track at the station. However, more people came from the Newton stations than originally anticipated. In June of 1960, the MTA upgraded the power and signal systems along the line. Upgrading power capability allowed for more trains to run, while the signal improvements offered better headways. These two features especially helped during rush hour, where 3-car PCC trains ran every 3 minutes from Riverside to downtown Boston. Riverside also got treated with the maintenance facility and additional storage tracks. The increased track capacity provided more trains to start from Riverside without needing to facilitate trolleys out of Reservoir. The MTA eventually handed the reins of its services to its successor, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, in 1964. By 1967, as part of the MBTA's new brand identity, the Riverside line was denoted as the D branch on the Green Line trolley network. As time progressed, the D branch saw various changes, improvements, and upgrades, some of which included improving accessibility for all users at stations. The most notable changes came with Reservoir and Riverside. In August of 1980, the short-term loop tracks above the through line at Reservoir had closed down permanently as part of the new Reservoir Car House building. This left some reconfiguration with the connection between the C and D branches to the newly built car house and the through line to Riverside. At Riverside, the terminal discontinued using its 1959 station building for a new platform area in 1995. The relocation allowed for accessibility for all users while providing faster turnarounds for trains. Meanwhile, the old station building has been reused for various intercity bus operators since being relieved of train duties. Funny how things can be reused without mindlessly demolishing them for worse replacements, MTA. Good things happened for the D branch, but there had been some disturbances. On October 20th, 1996, a heavy rainstorm led to water accumulating so much in the muddy river to spill over to the Fenway portal and flood parts of the Green Line subway. Shuttles were provided where trolleys couldn't reach. Interestingly, one of these shuttles was a commuter rail service which ran from Riverside to South Station with a temporary platform set up at Riverside. As a trivia point, the Green Line is technically directly connected with the National Railroad network at Riverside. Thankfully, the muddy river flooding didn't lead to any injuries or loss of life. However, there was a tragic event that led to reshaping the whole Green Line. On May 28, 2008, a westbound train crashed behind another westbound train between Woburn and Woodland. The cause was due to the driver of the rear train having a case of microsleep, which made them unaware of their surroundings. This resulted in 14 injuries as well as the death of the aforementioned driver. The unfortunate event was a catalyst to a new safety system for the entire Green Line network. This system is known as the Green Line Train Protection System. As the name suggests, this feature helps trains in avoiding collisions and accidents from errors such as driving too fast or running past red signals without proper clearances. The D branch, like the other Green Line branches, continues to evolve in operations and infrastructure, be it where it terminates or improving access for all of its users.
The last notable change, at least by the time this video comes out, is the opening of the Union Square branch as part of the Green Line extension. Like Newton, the city of Somerville pushed the folks at GLX to provide a spur to Union Square to help revitalize the neighborhood. After some planning and construction, on March 21st, 2022, the Union Square branch began running. Though the E branch was the initial recipient of the new extension, the D branch took full ownership at the end of 2022 when the E branch was rerouted to the new Medford branch of GLX. If you'd like to learn more about GLX and the opening of the Union Square branch and Medford branch, then check out my previous two videos on the two subjects, linked in the description. And that's the story of the Green Line's longest branch, the D branch. One of countless stories in the development of the USA, and one which gets to share the same birthday. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. I'd like to give a thanks to Stephen Boucher's book, Boston in Transit, and Bradley Clark's book, Boston's MTA, Riverside, and Beyond. They've been very helpful sources in the making of this video. I'd like to also give a shout out to Historic Newton for helping me answer some questions related to the Highland branch and the making of the Newton Circuit Railroad. Also, thank you to everybody who made the Wikipedia articles that helped guide in making this video. All the links will be listed in the description below. Again, thank you for watching. Happy birthday to the US, happy birthday to the D branch, and next stop,